Zamioculcas, Zamiifolia. Oh, hey, today we're going to talk about the ZZ plant or Zanzibar gem. This is a little bit something different today because this is a succulent plant, and usually you can identify succulent plants when you have a look at the leaves. Like, the thicker the leaves are, the more there is an indication that these are succulent plants that are rather drought tolerant and can be for an extended period without watering. And the ZZ plant is definitely one of these plants that can go for a while without watering. But hey, let's have a look again at this this card I got here when I bought this plant. So it tells you what to do and what not to do in terms of care, and let's get started with that. So there's an indication of a sun, like half black and half white. I think it should indicate like medium light or semi-shade. This is a little bit difficult, I would say. Like semi-shade, that's probably how it would be growing outside, but anything that you provide in terms of semi-shade indoors is definitely not enough light. Certainly this plant will survive it. I'm going to tell you a little story how I kept this plant for the last couple of years, but it's definitely not the best way how you should grow the ZZ plant. Yeah, we will get into that. It says also water 1 time every 2 weeks and add some fertilizer every 2 months. Temperatures 15 to 25 degrees. That's like 59 degrees Fahrenheit to probably 65 degrees Fahrenheit. We will get into that. So let's talk about the ZZ plant care, as you will. All right, I'll just throw this away again. Let's start with soil. So these plants are fairly drought tolerant. In terms of soil, whenever you have a succulent, like a cactus or a succulent plant or a plant that has succulent properties, you want to have a soil that is well draining. Really important. These plants usually they don't really appreciate soggy soil. This is no exception with the ZZ plant. So what works great is cactus soil. So a cactus soil mix is perfect. Usually they contain horticultural sand and also perlite. So that's a perfect mix. Like you can use a ratio of 1:1 or like a 50-50. That works just fine. This one, as I can see, is in perlite. There's some sand in it, some coconut fiber and coconut husk. Also a really good mix. Works just great for the ZZ plant. So in terms of soil, as I mentioned, well draining is the name of the game here again. If you keep it like that, if you use this kind of soil mix, you shouldn't have any issues or problems. All right, I told you I'm going to tell you a little story, and it has a lot to do with light. So I wanted to test how little or much light these plants actually need. In this description it said like semi-shade. Definitely. That's possible with the ZZ plant, but I wouldn't recommend it. So the story goes like this. I had this plant in bright indirect light, which I thought or pretty much knew that it would be the best possible light for the ZZ plant. So it was really growing really well. Everything was doing fine, was almost flowering. A lot of new growth was coming up. But then I had to move it from its spot because we rearranged our apartment and I had to put it in a spot in our bedroom, which was really dark. And since our bedroom was to the inside of a building, it had like really little light. There was almost no light coming in to the room, because also we had a curtain all the time because our apartment was looking into the inside of a apartment building complex. So yeah, I had a look at the plant every couple of days and it still looked great and everything was perfect. But what I did is I was still watering the ZZ plant exactly the same way as I was watering it in a bright indirect spot, and unfortunately it rotted and died down. So my conclusion is definitely you can also keep this plant in a darker spot. I even read stories in the internet like where people left their ZZ plant for half a year in a cupboard or somewhere in completely dark, and it still look the same as it looked at day one. Yeah, so you can conclude it's not dying, but as I always say with houseplants, you want to give them their best life, and certainly bright indirect light is what you should be aiming for with the ZZ plant, because this way it's going to grow really fine. But yeah, if you have an office or a space where it's a little bit darker, these plants will survive it, no question, but probably will not grow as well. Anyways, in terms of temperature, this little card here that I got with the plant says 15 degrees Celsius, which is 59 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know if you ever witnessed, probably you did, 59 degrees Fahrenheit. I think it's pretty cold. I mean, definitely you can do that. It will survive it. That these are really strong plants. I think almost impossible to kill unless you overwater. But 59 is really, really cold. So it's always difficult with these temperature ranges because you should never hit the extremes, nor the low extreme or the high extreme. Something in between is usually best. So I would recommend 65 degrees Fahrenheit up to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 18 degrees Celsius to 24 degrees Celsius. Yeah, that's it in terms of temperature. I think with that you will have no issues or problems at all. Humidity is an easy topic for this kind of houseplant. They don't need a lot of humidity, so anything around 40% humidity is absolutely perfect and sufficient. You don't need high humidity for these plants. I think it can even be harmful to have too much of humidity because the soil might stay wet and rot might start. So yeah, around 40% is all you need. Propagation. Propagation is a cool topic because basically these kind of plants propagate themselves. ZZ plants, they produce tubers underneath. They kind of look like tomatoes, if you will. They have tubers, so you see, or maybe it's hard for you to see, but these are actually like multiple plants inside this pot, because these plants are going to start to grow tubers, and then new leaves are going to grow out of the soil. And this is also how you can propagate them. You just cut through a tuber that has some leaves and also hopefully some roots on it, and you just have a new plant. So usually when you buy them, you could divert them into different sections, and right off the bat you have a couple of ZZ plants. Interesting also is that, yeah, because they're growing some kind of tubers, you can not see it here, but the pot is extremely deformed. Like, they're very strong and they will deform pots. This is a plastic pot, luckily, but I think if you're using a clay pot, I don't know, it might explode at some point. So if you feel like all this tension and pressure, think about propagating it or potting it. Yeah, probably. So yeah, propagation is very easy. You don't need to propagate it in water or anything like that. If you cut off the tuber, you just put it in its own pot with some potting soil. This works really well, it's sufficient. You don't need water. It's also interesting that I haven't tried it myself, but you can also propagate the ZZ plant taking leaves. So some plants can be propagated with leaf cuttings, others can't. This is one that can. You just take off the leaf, you just snip it off or you cut it off, and yeah, you put the tip into water, and within a couple of weeks roots will start to grow. And this is actually a neat way, because like this I could probably propagate maybe 100 plants out of this ZZ plant. I haven't talked about watering yet. Yeah, I should. I mean, you don't water these plants too much, but watering is a very important subject, because watering is maybe the #1 killer of ZZ plants. Once you overwater, it's a slippery slope. There's usually only one ending: root rot, mushy plants, mushy roots, and everything falling apart. So
never ever overwater a ZZ plant.
what I do is I water them every 3 to 4 weeks. It's absolutely the perfect plant that thrives on neglect. I think the less thought you put into caring of this plant, I think the better it grows and thrives. So don't water too much. Every 3 to 4 weeks is absolutely fine. Reduce watering in autumn and winter time. Maybe every month or two is even fine. they do not need a lot of water. I mean, you can always check the leaves and you can check how plump these plants are. If everything is fine, you don't need to water too much. So the potting soil should be almost completely dry for an extended period. I'm pretty sure the CC plant will also collect some of the water in the tubers and also in the leaves. I mean, the leaves are not that thick, but they will store water for drought periods, so don't water too much. All right, we talked about watering, we talked about propagation, light, soil, all these kind of topics. Let's talk about growth. Yeah, they're not very quickly growing, I would say. So yeah, it's always a pleasure to see when stalks are growing out of the soil. So usually the leaves are still enclosed and it will grow upwards, and then somehow the leaves are going to be released. And they grow quite tall. I've seen huge specimen. They just need some time. So it's not a fast grower. It's definitely a slow grower. But since it needs so little care, it's a fantastic plant. It's really beautiful. I think what I like most about the CC plant are these really waxy and shiny leaves, like the adaxial side of the leaf, the upper side of the leaf is really glossy. And it's a nice, beautiful, dark green color that just look fantastic the way they are. Potting. Yeah, potting is our last topic almost here. In terms of potting, I have this here in a plastic container, but what I really like is a ceramic pot, like a terracotta pot basically is best, because the great properties of terracotta pots are that they're very porous. So the sides of the pots and all of the pot is really porous. So if you water a CC plant, the extra moisture and the extra water is flowing away and will also be collected and stored in the terracotta pot, or at least it will get out of the pores of the terracotta pot. So usually with terracotta pots, you have to water a little bit more, or in that case, it's perfectly fine if everything is drying up quickly. So terracotta pots are perfect. The porous nature also helps to take air to the soil and also to the roots. It's almost like a membrane. So that works great. But as you can see, also a plastic pot is working fine. I'm often working with plastic pots because it's very easy to put them in a nicer, beautiful looking planter. And if you water, you just take them out of the good looking planter, you water them, and then you can just put them back. Very important.
You need drainage holes.
I think without drainage holes, it's very easy to kill a CC plant. After you've watered, like the water should drain quickly out of the pot, and the soil should drain almost instantly or start to drain, and within a day or two it needs to be rather dry already, or be getting dry, because moist soil for several days, an extended period, is not what the CC plant wants. Let's talk about fertilizing. I fertilize my CC plant in spring and summer. This is the main growth phase of almost every plant, and certainly also the CC plant. So when I'm fertilizing, I usually fertilize once a month. I think that's fairly enough and sufficient, because the CC plant is not growing that quickly. When I fertilize, I use a liquid fertilizer at half strength. It's always important to dilute the fertilizer you're using, especially if you're dealing with a potted plant, because the fertilizer cannot go very far. And you always risk having root burn because of the fertilizer if it's too strong. Diluting the fertilizer to half strength is actually optimal, and that way you're not risking any root burn. I'm not fertilizing in autumn and winter. If you want to do it, you can certainly do, but what you should do is that you reduce how often you're fertilizing. So if you fertilize every month in spring and summer, you should fertilize about every 2 to 3 months in autumn and winter. Maybe you have like a very bright window, and also you might be using grow lights. So it might be a good idea to fertilize your CC plant, because of course it can still grow in the autumn and winter, but it will just grow less fast. In terms of fertilizing from when to when exactly, in spring and summer, usually it's about April to August. This is where your CC plant will really need some fertilizer, or at least it will benefit from fertilizer and might grow much quicker that way. What you can also do is you can use slow release fertilizer. Usually these last between 3 to 6 months. The good thing about slow release fertilizer is that almost all the time your CC plant has the nutrients it needs to grow. So that's really great. The disadvantage is you can't really control how much nutrients are available at the time. So that's probably an argument against using slow release fertilizer, but it also works really, really well. But I will stick with my liquid fertilizer. Yeah, anything else I wanted to tell you about fertilizer? You can use a general houseplant fertilizer. You don't need anything special. So usually they are really balanced. Without really testing the soil, it's anyways really hard to tell what nutrients are there and what aren't. And so using a well-balanced fertilizer is a great choice. So in terms of fertilizer, you have to look at the NPK ratio. So usually like a 5-5-5, 10-10-10, or a 20-20-20 are balanced fertilizers that you can certainly use. Yeah, if you like these videos, please support us, subscribe to our channel, like this video by giving it a thumbs up, and leave a comment. That would really be great to stay in touch. And thank you so much for your support. See you again very soon.